Hey guys, I want to show you where all the larval tiers are in Elden Ring, because you need these in order to rebirth at Renala and change your stats. There are 18 of them in a single playthrough. They respawn when you go into New Game Plus, but otherwise there's no way to farm them, so you're limited to 18 each time you play through the game. Now, some of these are a little tricky to find, but thankfully I'm here to help show you where you can find all larval tiers in Elden Ring. The first larval tier you want to look for is in Limgrave. Yes, the very start of the game has a larval tier, even though you can't use it until you get to Rhea Lucaria. Go to the Agheel Lake South gray spot and head directly east. There will be a wandering noble up on the cliff kind of by himself. If you attack him, he'll turn into a lesser rune bear. Now, I don't know what the lore implications are of nobles suddenly turning into monsters, but it happens a few times in the larval tier hunt. I would also recommend clearing out some of the enemies around this guy, because there's a Kaiden mercenary that patrols on horseback, and in my fight with the rune bear, I do actually engage the mercenary. But this will be the earliest larval tier that you can find in the game, provided you can actually kill one of these bears pretty early on. These guys are tough, they do a lot of damage and have a lot of health, so good luck. The next larval tier we're going to go for is in the village of the Albinaurics in the Liurnia of the Lakes. This is on the west part of the Liurnia of the Lakes map, and you can access it by going up from a ramp. Now, the graveyard is right next to the Grace, so don't go across this bridge, but you'll just walk over here, right by the Grace spot, and that is the larval tier. Now, be prepared, because all these guys are going to come after you when you take their larval tier away from them. The next larval tier in Liurnia of the Lakes is northwest from the Boil Prawn Shack, where the Blackguard is. Now, you can see the gazebo off in the distance there. It's actually surrounded by 4 giant crayfish. And I know how much we hate the crayfish in this game because they have sniper rifles for that mudsling shot that they do. Now, you won't have to fight all of them because 3 of them are asleep. We want to attack the one that's actually patrolling up and down the lake, because it's not actually a giant crayfish, it's a grafted Scion in disguise. But the only way to force it out of its disguise is to kill it as a giant crayfish, and then kill it as a grafted Scion. So this is a little bit of a tough fight. You can see I buffed myself for it with the Wondrous Physic, because I know I'm in a world of hurt going after not just the crayfish, but the giant Scion afterwards. The next larval tier that we're going to go for in Liurnia of the Lakes has a couple of prerequisites that we have to fulfill before we can collect it. The first thing we have to do is we have to gather the Resurrection Painting, which is in the Artist Shack in the east part of Liurnia of the Lakes. Where the road forks and heads down into the lake, there's another path that continues along on the banks or the high ground or the mountains, whatever you want to call it. You follow that east all the way until you can't go any farther, and at the very tip of that eastern portion is the Artist Shack. You'll know you'll get there because there's going to be a knight that patrols on horseback in front of it. Now, after we have the Resurrection Painting, we need to defeat Royal Knight Loretta at the Caria Manor. Once we do that, we get access to the Three Sisters Rise. Instead of going into the Three Sisters area where there's a dragon and we can go meet Ranni and pledge our loyalty to her, if we instead loop around and head east, it'll take us towards a graveyard. In this graveyard, there will be a couple of Albinaurics. They're guarding a body that has the juvenile robes on it, as well as a larval tier. Now, the last larval tier that we can get in Liurnia of the Lakes also requires us to defeat Royal Knight Loretta. Once we defeat Loretta, we go out into the Three Sisters area, but instead of heading east like we did to head towards the graveyard, we're going to instead head southwest. When we get to the cliff edge, there's a spot we can jump off at. Carefully jumping off of this spot and following the wood platforms down actually takes us to an upper area above another gray spot that you would have had to go through when you went through the Caria Manor earlier. In this upper area, we meet a guy named Pidia.
Sorry, your worship.
Pidia is an Albinauric who takes care of the puppets in the Caria Manor. He is a merchant. You can buy a few things from him, and what we're looking for is his larval tear.
I am charged with maintaining these ghastly dolls. Your worship, allow me to be of use. Other than the puppets, there are some very fine things up here in this storeroom. Why not pick something out before you go? But please, can you offer poor ill-starred Pidia a little something by way of compensation?
Now that we've taken care of Liurnia of the Lakes, let's move on to Caelid. In Caelid, we want to go to Caelid Highway South. And heading directly south from this gray spot will take us to one of those collections of sarcophaguses which have golden runes of varying levels to give you some free runes. This one, though, has a bunch of nobles who are looting around in it. There's one noble in particular, just like the rune bearer we fought earlier, that when we kill him, he transforms. Except this one will transform into a troll with a flaming sword. Now we fight quite a few trolls in the game, but I don't think I've ever seen any with a fire sword. So I don't know what the lore is of the nobles that suddenly transform into the monsters when we attack them. But here's another one to add to that list, and it has a unique weapon. Defeat the troll and the larval tear is yours. Okay, this next larval tear is in the Altus Plateau, and it was actually kind of tricky for me to find. So I hope you guys have an easier way about it after watching this video. We're going to be heading into these ruins, which are directly south from the Windmill village. On the map, it's going to be east of the Erd Tree, but you can't get to it from the Erd Tree because the minor Erd Tree is in the low part of the area, and this is on the higher ground. So we're going to run our way over to these ruins. Now, once we get to the ruins, there's going to be a wandering noble who also, when he's attacked, will transform into a monster. You'll have to defeat this lion in order to get the larval tear. In Mount Gelmir, there is a larval tear that you can get. It's directly east from the spot where you grab the Mount Gelmir map. There will be a Wormface on the road heading down to the desiccated Erd Tree that's on the end of the road, I guess, right before the bridge breaks. Now, the Wormface, I die here, but I do manage to kill it and get the larval tear. The lore that I've seen, or the lore theory that I've seen, is the hand spiders are one person, and they all come from Lord Rykard. Roll! Oh, no, I got caught again. Oh, goodness. And Death Blighted again. Well, I got the larval tier at least. There's another merchant that sells larval tiers to you. Down in the Siofra River, which you can access through the elevator in Mistwood, which is in eastern Limgrave, I believe. Follow the area all the way through. It'll be a little tricky because it's full of claymen. But you come up through the river and there's a spot called the Worshipper's Woods. In this area, kind of like Nokron, right? It's an underground city. Some of it's in ruins. But here, just west of the Grace, you'll see all this wooden scaffolding. If we climb up the scaffolding, there's a ladder to get up there. You'll have to fight a couple of ancestors down here on the ladders. But it's a one-on-one area. You won't have a whole lot of space to roll off. But if you can beat them in one-on-one real quick, nothing to worry about. Once we climb all the way up, we need to make a jump to this platform. And then we'll be on a bridge that takes us into one of the ruins. Now, in here, we just need to follow the cave all the way around. And you'll find an old campsite. And you follow it a little bit further. And you should hear some music. Once you hear the music, you're coming up on another one of those traveling/wandering merchants. This guy has a couple of useful things to buy from him. But for the purposes of this video, we just want the larval tier. The next 5 larval tiers require us to defeat General Radahn, because when we kill General Radahn, a giant meteor crashes into the world, leaving behind a crater that when you descend all the way, you get to Nokron, the Eternal City. Down here in Nokron, there's 2 larval tiers we can pick up, 2 larval tiers we get as a boss reward from the Mimic tier fight, and a 5th one we get from killing a Silver Sphere. So directly east from the Spot of Grace is going to be this Gazebo area. If we head south from the Gazebo, this building that kind of looks like a church has a larval tier inside of it with some of these underground people guarding it, harvesting it. I don't know what they're doing. We're going to pick that one up, and then we're going to head east out of the area. There's going to be a staircase down. Heading east down the stairs and turning the corner, we can see the Boss Fog Gate. But before we go and fight the Mimic tier, a little bit to our right, we'll see another Gazebo. Now, in here is another larval tier, but it is guarded by some slimes on the ceiling. So we're going to grab the larval tier and roll away before any of those slimes can drop on us. Now that we have the second larval tier of the area in our inventory, we're going to make our run for the boss gate. The boss is the Mimic tier. We get the Mimic tier later on as a summon behind a gate locked with a stone sword key. The things that you need to remember for this fight is it wears all the same armor that you have, it has all the same stats that you have, it uses the same weapons, and anything you have equipped on your inventory pouch, it will use as well. So you'll see this guy will throw a kukri at my jellyfish. That's because I had kukris on my inventory. So take your time with the Mimic tier fight. It's kind of fun to fight yourself, especially with all the mechanics available to you in the game. He uses Ashes of War, he triggers bleeds, he heals himself, and you can backstab him. So be careful, because he's just as powerful as you. You just have to outsmart the AI and hope that your summon can draw attention every once in a while so you can heal. At the end of the fight, he's going to drop 2 larval tiers and a silver tier mask. Now, after you defeat the Mimic tier, there's going to be a long bridge that you have to go across, and you'll come across an area that's got some ancestral followers in it. You grab the gray spot, and you'll see there's a whole city area that's got like some rooftops that you can descend across. You need to follow this area all the way down because the treasure for Ranni is at the very base of this area. The lowest level is called the Knight's Sacred Ground. On your way down there, you're going to come through this church-like building that has a bridge in it. And at the bottom floor is going to be 2 of these Nox people. I think they're called Newmans. I'm not 100% sure. And a Silver Sphere. Now, I'm cautious around the Silver Sphere because it does a lot of damage and a lot of knockback. So you see me panic rolling, trying to get away from it. But thankfully, it doesn't know friend from foe, so it actually damages the Sword's Mistress and finishes her off for me. Now, these things are too fat to get through the doors, and we'll use that to our advantage. I don't do a whole lot of damage to it. It doesn't have any bleed bar that I can trigger a hemorrhage on, So I will just smack away at it until it finishes. And when it dies, we'll just pick up the larval tier and move on. There are 3 larval tiers that we can get in Nokstella, and they're all dropped by silver spheres. Remember that big round rolling thing that we ran into in Nokron in the Night's Sacred Ground? That's exactly what is going to drop the next 3 larval tiers for us. Now, to get to Nokstella, you have to take the portal from Ranni's tower, or she relocates to Renna's tower, I believe. But at the top of the tower is going to be a portal that's going to take you down into the lower parts of the Ansel River, I believe. And once you follow that all the way through, then you'll end up in Nokstella. So from the Nokstella Grace, we're going to head west, and there's the staircase up. Once we deal with the slimes in the area, we run across this balcony, and there's another staircase up. Then there's going to be a bridge with another staircase. At the top of the staircase is a silver sphere, who sees us coming a mile away from his vantage point. Now this is kind of a dangerous spot to fight in, but thankfully these silver tiers are kind of dumb, so all we have to do is use the terrain to our advantage. I run out, I hit him a bunch of times, I roll back, and just wait for him to bonk against it. The silver sphere can't attack you without rolling forward, so when it expends all of its momentum running into something, it has to roll back before it can attack you again. I go back and forth with this a few times. There's no bleed bar for me to trigger a sudden burst of damage, so after 5 or 6 attempts, it finally drops the larval tier that we're looking after. Now, in the building to our right, not going directly up the staircase, there's another silver sphere, except this one is hanging from the ceiling, kind of a trap, because there's a chest in there with a great glove ghostwort, one of the upgrades, the final upgrade for one of the summons. Now you can sit here and you can throw things at it. I changed my mind from the throwing daggers and I moved to the fire potions because the fire pots actually knock it off of the ceiling, and it's actually a little bit faster than just throwing a whole bunch of throwing knives at it. Don't untarget from it like I did on the first one. If you target it directly, your character actually throws the fire pot straight up. And now, just like before, the door is too big to fit him through. So we hit him a bunch of times and we retreat through the door before he can bonk us. Now that we've gotten the second larval tier, we can head up the staircase where the first silver sphere we fought was. We're going to want to go into this church building, and you can see on the ceiling that there's another silver sphere. Now this one is special in that for whatever reason it spawns a bunch of these slimes. Now if you want, you could sit here and fight through all the waves of the slimes and then trigger the silver sphere fight. Instead, I opt for throwing a fire pot right onto the silver sphere to trigger it to fall down because, again, it doesn't know friend from foe. So it's going to roll into all the slimes and clean them up for us. And then the couple that sneak out the door, we can finish them off before we attack the silver sphere. And like every other silver sphere we fight, the doorway is too small to let it through. So we're safe to do a full combo on it, back up, recover our stamina, and then come in and finish it off for the last larval tier in Nokstella. Alright, I saved the hardest larval tier for last. If you have found the 2 secret halves of the rolled medallion, which allows you into the Consecrated Snowfield, from the inner Consecrated Snowfield Grace site, you can head east-southeast, and you're going to find a couple of nobles trying to help another noble who is buried in the snow. Now, the first 2 nobles are just like every other wandering undead noble. They go down in one hit. But this last guy is a doozy. This footage took me a couple times to record, because I kept dying to what he transforms into. And even right here, I accidentally trigger it. I meant to buff. But this is a greater rune bear, and this is in the Consecrated Snowfield area. This is a final part of the game. These dudes have a ton of health, and they do a ton of damage. I wish I buffed for this fight. It was a lot of panic rolling, a lot of panic healing, and a lot of patience to get this clip. But after a nearly 2.5 minute, almost 3 minute fight against this bear, I get the final larval tier on the list. And that's all 18 larval tier locations. If this video helped you out, please leave a like on it. It helps me out a lot in return. And if you want to see more gameplay and maybe catch a stream live, please subscribe to the channel. I play a lot of video games, including Elden Ring. And hope to see you guys in the next stream or video.